Hi and welcome to Hopey Changey, a channel where we lead by example as we try out ways to be more sustainable at home. We would love for you to keep watching because even if you're not into sustainability, our videos also include ways to reduce costs and improve your well-being. And the sustainable action we'll be trying today is using permaculture for pest keeping. Permaculture being sustainable living through ecological design, which is integrated into our property. And some of the steps we've taken include building a large garden, harvesting rainwater, composting. We built a passive net zero home, have native plants surrounding the property, and protected any nearby animal shelters. This brings us to our first attempts in year one of our project, where our natural pest keeping methods were shoeing and fencing. These methods all coming from the biggest question we had: who has been digging in my garden? Enter culprit number one, Claudette the groundhog. The first time I saw cheeky Claudette, she was rummaging through our garden early one morning. I went outside to inspect the damage after shooing her away. We made these layered Hugelkultur beds, piled with logs, sticks, leaves, and the compost we assumed she went after. Nothing we can't cover up easily. But we took this as a sign. The time had come for fencing. No, not that kind of fencing. This kind of fencing. Wattle fencing. Wattle fences have been built to protect gardens for centuries. We use fresh-cut boughs woven between larger upright stakes hammered into the ground. Ours is about 2 feet tall. If you can, try to source rot-resistant species like cedar. We went to sleep hoping our efforts were enough to keep these culprits out, but I soon spied something suspicious out the window and was right back at shoeing a hungry groundhog right up our hill. So we decided to keep upgrading our defenses by building taller fences. My husband and I are very cost conscious, so it had to be cheap despite having a very large plot to protect. We ordered coated metal T-type fence posts and spaced them about 6 feet apart. In between each post, my husband dug 12 inches down and attached corrosion-proof chicken wire to the posts. We had researched that having a 90-degree bend for 6 inches at the bottom would help to prevent any creatures from digging under. For added rigidity, my husband secured everything together with some repurposed clothes drying cord. To save on materials, the chicken wire does not extend the whole way up. The top section we experimented with using brightly colored twine through the T-bar holes to keep larger culprits from jumping over the chicken wire section. We thought this, plus the obstacle course we created between the wattle fence surrounding the outside, would be enough. But our sweet little Claudette, we realized, not only needed a name, but also needed a good laugh at our experiment. It wasn't long until she figured out how to hop right over that chicken wire to rummage through our newly built beds. So shortly after that, we replaced the twine with plastic bird mesh that completed the fence up to about the 7-foot high mark, which we hoped would help keep out culprit number 2, and culprit number 3, and culprit number 4, and also culprit number 5. And culprit number 6. And speaking of culprits, I came across the tiniest by far. I witnessed a little mouse pop out of a hole it dug in the garden, bite off an entire bean plant, and then yank it back into its hole where it already had another 2 bean plants. Upon closer inspection, I saw that my pepper plants had also taken quite a beating. Realizing we had other pests that the fencing wouldn't be able to keep out led us to try our second natural pest keeping technique, spraying our plants with peppermint oil to really gross out the mice. Well, as soon as Claudette heard about the mice moving in, she was off to let her friends know that the housewarming party was on. It wasn't long before we saw her bringing others by the house, like this porcupine with the munchies, and her hummingbird friend who flew all the way into town for the party from the deep south. So it's becoming clear to us in year one of our permaculture experiment that protecting Claudette and her friends' natural burrows around the property was proven to be a huge challenge to us, but a huge win for them. And I mean, we love the fact that we are helping nature to flourish, but we weren't really sure that we'd be able to produce anything edible for ourselves, let alone sustain our diet with the garden, using only these natural pest keeping methods. But then before we knew it, it was October, and the seasons were starting to change. There really wasn't any time left in the growing year to experiment anymore. We'd have to wait and see what year 2 had in store for us. But all of a sudden, in the dead of winter, in the middle of March, we started to see some signs of life. At first, we thought maybe a neighbor's dog, maybe a neighbor's cat, but the tracks mysteriously led right down to the groundhog burrow where we last saw Claudette. Well, it turns out it wasn't a neighbor's dog. It was actually a fox couple who had discovered the burrow and moved in, much to the misfortune of Claudette. After a bit of research and a visit from a neighbor who's a local biologist, who also noticed the fox family move in, we learned that foxes move into the city to have their babies in the spring. They hedge their bets being close to humans who they deem safer to raise their kits around than the coyotes out in the wild that they normally have to contend with. Coyotes won't typically venture into the city near humans, so we got to watch the babies grow up until about July when they were big enough to venture back out into the wild. Mom is a black fox, also known as a melanistic fox, which are rare and make up only about 10% of foxes in North America. Dad is a red fox, meaning that with their powers combined, they had babies who are referred to as cross kits because of their mixed color. We thought there were only 5 babies for the longest time, but eventually saw a total of 6 out together. Even though we started seeing Mom and Dad around March, these babies really didn't start coming out until the very end of April. We kept wondering what had become of Claudette and hoped that she had run off to find another safe haven. But in just one season, our pest woes had completely turned around. The burrow we had kept natural and protected wasn't just a good home for garden feeders, it turned out. It was also an ideal den for predators. This left us with an incredible feeling because we were getting to witness nature balancing itself out. This is what permaculture was all about. With humans, build it and they will come. Whereas with nature, protect it and they will come. Where the juicy gardens may have attracted the garden-feeding critters at first, those critters themselves attract larger predators if you give nature the time and space it needs to let that natural order play out. By protecting this space and avoiding removing the yard pests unnaturally, our mice and groundhog problem ended up being solved naturally by attracting the foxes to find this haven for themselves. We knew that the kits had a big appetite because we found some hides and animal skulls along the driveway where the den is. But Mom and Dad seemed to be going off to do all of the hunting for the first month or two and bringing things back for the kids. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I saw Dad bringing back a groundhog for the kids, not Claudette. Not only was he trotting right past her back door with it, but then he ran into a deer. Even though deer are far too big for foxes to count as prey, I could tell that the fox's presence made them uneasy, and we started to see less and less of the deer and more of our hostas near too. Dad didn't seem to mind as he had a job to do and a family to feed, so he went about his business giving Mom the meal to take down to the kids. And as much as we love seeing these darling deers and their babies who would do their zoomies throughout the yard, they bring a lot of ticks with them and can still jump over our 7-foot fences whenever they feel like it. So the foxes keeping the deers at bay was an added bonus in terms of naturally dealing with our garden pests. This has really got to be one of my favorite animal interactions I've ever seen on our land so far. It makes it feel like we're doing something right when all these animals are using our space as a safe corridor and a stopping place on their journeys. And here comes Mom looking for the rest of the kits to feed lunch to. At this stage, we see the babies playing quite a bit with their food, sneaking up on it and scaring it, jumping on it. We can tell that they're practicing for the big event coming up when they start going out and learning how to hunt for themselves. As they're getting bigger, we start to see them getting bolder, off alone, and out at night. And before you know it, our little ones are all grown up and out hunting for themselves. This wee chap is now catching groundhogs for himself as he takes it as far away from his brothers and sisters as he can to enjoy in peace. Quick learner, which brings us full circle to ask in year 2, who has been digging in my garden? And the answer is nobody. Well, other than me and Zan, of course. But we seem to have been able to keep the yard pests at bay just enough between our fencing, shoeing, mint sprays, and natural burrow protection to have beautiful gardens and finally our first real harvest around the 700-day mark. It's been a labor of love, but it has all been worth it. We've had lots of other projects on the go alongside these experiments in permaculture at the same time. And we would love for you to check out Zan's latest videos that we're going to link here because we use the tire pounding principles we learned at the Earthship Academy to build a retaining wall out of discarded tires to make this cost-effective wall and garden. Thank you so much for your time. That's all from us at Hopey Changey for today. Bye.